Everybody missed the inside joke. Good afternoon. Welcome to the May 1st, 2007 meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority. May we have a roll call, please?
Authority members: Draymond.
Here.
Mincy.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Barazian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Chairman Weaver.
Here. And we have a report.
Agenda for the May 1st, 2007 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, April 26, 2007 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Next, please.
Next is the approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move 4A.
Second.
Okay. Objection. Minutes will stand approved as submitted. Next, please.
Next is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the Housing Authority may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The matter may be referred to staff through the Executive Director for investigation and report.
Thank you. I have no cards or communications closed. Next, please.
Is there any authority member or staff comments or new business?
Mr. Yusefian.
Mr. Chair, I would like to ask the staff, when are we going to get the startup letter for the Mira Loma? Since the city lights is almost finished, when they're going to start on the other one?
It's Mr. Chair, members of the Housing Authority. I don't know exactly when they're starting construction. They have all of their entitlements, but I'll find out.
Yeah, well, my understanding is we have to give them a letter to get them started, and they're basically waiting for us to give them a startup letter so they can get going.
I'll check on that.
And since weather is nice, it's time to dig.
Will do.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Najarian.
I'd just like to relate that I received a phone call today from Mayor Bill Bogart of Pasadena, who was congratulating us on the ease and speed in which we can develop, design, and fund affordable housing in Glendale. And he is urging his staff to take notes from Glendale and hopefully increase the development of affordable housing in Pasadena.
Good.
So, congratulations to Madeline and staff and everyone else involved, Peter, the whole team.
That's what some people think. Okay. Any other items? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Okay, stand adjourned at 3:15.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Glendale Redevelopment Agency meeting on May 1st, 2007. May we have a roll call for agency, please?
Agency members: Draymond.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chairman Yusefian.
Here, may we have your report, please?
The agenda for the May 1, 2007 regular meeting of the Glendale Redevelopment Agency was posted on Thursday, April 26, 2007 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
What's next, please?
Next is approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
The minutes will stand approved. What's next, please?
Oral communication discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the redevelopment agency may question or respond to a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The executive director may refer. The matter may be referred to staff through the executive director for investigation and report.
Okay, I have several cards. Arnie Rothsberger. Your name for the record, please.
Thank you very much. Yes,
5
my
minutes.
name is Arnie Roethlisberger, and I'm an attorney, and I represent Comar Investments of Newport Beach. And as you probably all well know, Comar has been working very diligently for about the last year to 18 months to develop a hotel at the site of 111 East Wilson. They are here today, and they have been, as I said, they've been working diligently. They were quite excited after the March 20 meeting of the redevelopment agency. You voted to ask the staff to prepare an RFP or an RFQ. However, they're here today, they're dismayed, they're perplexed, they're frustrated, and they're angry. And the reason for that is that on April 25th, they received a call from staff indicating that the RFP was basically taken off the table, and that you were going to deal exclusively with the people that had suggested the Aloft Hotel and the Hotel Meridian. That this was done in a closed session after you had had an open session debate on the RFP, and then you just pulled it out from underneath my client and from other potential developers here in the city. And we believe that that's a Brown Act violation. There was no reason for that to be a closed session. Now, my client is still very excited about the possibility of putting a site in there, putting a hotel in there. The Indigo Hotel is what they had proposed, and they want to work with the city to do that. But again, we need an explanation. We need to see, I guess we're going to have to go back and take a look at the public records and see how this closed session came about and what was talked about. The rumors already, we have been besieged with rumors as to how it came about, why it came about, and people's motivations. But right now, they're rumors, and we can't substantiate them. However, we will be looking into this, but we would rather, as the speakers that will follow me will testify to, what we would rather do is get this back to the point where we can get the RFP or an RFQ, let the staff finish that. According to our knowledge and our communication with them, they were within less than a week before they were ready to put that out when they were stopped. So that's where we'd like to go back to. We think that's the best decision for the city. We think for the city to deal exclusively with the Hamidi Group is detrimental to the city's interest at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Aram Alajajian. Five minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Aram Alajajian. My address is 815 East Colorado, City of Glendale. I'm here today as a resident of Glendale for 30 years and the architect in practice in Glendale for 30 years. Our office, Alajajian Marcusi Architect, has done many projects here in this city, which won awards locally, nationally, and internationally, not only in Glendale, but in many cities in Southern California. I'm here today to speak about this hotel project. When we heard the decision made by this council to go along with the Aloft project, that really surprised me. Because the 20th of the March, when we were here, the direction of the council was very clear, to have two developers to respond to RFP or RFQ that staff would prepare. Now, we also heard a Aloft representation and a person that came up with an idea and was saying that tying those both lots are very valid for the city. I, as an architect and a planner, disagree with that decision, and I think that's a detrimental decision for this city. Tying both lots, or we heard a new term there, synergy. I don't understand, because one reason of that is they started the project about 2.5 years ago. When was the synergy then? I think what this developer is trying to do, basically to grab every single property that there is available in city of Glendale. We like to see that something happening, along the line. We have a project right now here on a table that it's ready to go with a committed group, Indigo Hotel, that will proceed fairly, and we have actually gone through the number of plan check. We spoke to the city and the staff. We have our communication with the Alex Theater for the loading area. And 11th hour, we hear that there's this group that they're trying to tie both projects together. Now, by tying both projects together, it's no good for the city. I think any developer that comes to this city deserves a fair decision, fair chance to present their project. If tying the project would be a way to go, I think tying that project together should be put on the table and have other developers to proceed with that kind of a project, with both projects together. Do not judge, do not compare apples with oranges. We have to compare apples with apples. And having said that, and having a group like Indigo Group and the Comar coming together for a project that is already done to a certain point, there's still a lot of work to be done, but working with the city, I think we have a good project at this time to move forward. Not to wait another 2 months, and then we'll be asked to extend another 2 months. Maybe then that synergy doesn't work. You need to give them a lot across the street for a synergy. And then maybe that's not enough. We need to give them a city hall for synergy. So this is my complaint. I want to address this to loud and clear, and I want to ask you to withdraw that decision and go back to the decision that you made on March 20th, an open session, and give a Comar a chance to bring their proposal, an equal chance to the Amidi Group to bring their proposal equally. Thank you very much.
Sako Marcusi.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Redevelopment Agency. My name is Sako Marcusi. I'm a licensed architect in the state of California. I'm one of the principals of Olajerji and Marcusi Architects, located at 815 East Colorado Streets in Glendale. I'm mainly here to reemphasize what Aram just spoke about. We have been working on this project diligently with the staff. We had several meetings with the planning, transportation, redevelopment agency for past 18 months. Off and on, we've been at the city. We have spent enormous amount of time and money on this project. Our office alone, I'm not talking about my clients who have gone through 2 different flags to get this project here in Glendale. All along, we have known that the planning, city planning, and the redevelopment agency, both of them, they thought that a hotel project was an excellent project for this location, simply because of the fact that we have an idle center, which is the project across the street, which has been not doing so well for past so many years. Even with the theaters within the project, the theater clientele, they're frequenting for a couple, 3 hours, but the hotel there will really create this synergy, as they were talking about. With the existing center, that will bring a lot of foot traffic to that area. People that will be staying in that hotel, they could frequent the restaurants, the shops along Maryland, and everybody, even the council in our last meetings, they thought, majority of the council thought that a hotel is a good project. And all along, that was the direction that we've been taken. And we worked on this diligently, with a lot of effort, working with Alex Theater, working with the staff to come up with a project which is best for the city. I also am a Glendalian. I've been living in the city for past 27 years, since 1980. And every little thing, every little change that happens in the city, it affects me too. It affects my family, my extended family. So I really care a lot about this city, about my city. And I think the project that we have presented is a far superior project to whatever other type of development that will happen there, be it an office building, a retail, or any other use. And I urge the council or the redevelopment agency members to withdraw their decision of exclusivity to one developer and stay their decision of the March 20th and give us a chance to come back with a proposal with the Indigo Hotel. Thank you.
Zaven Hanessian.
Good afternoon, Mayor Najarian and council members. My name is Zaven Hanessian. I have been in residence of Glendale for 34 years. I used to have my own business in Glendale, and I was appointed parking commissioner of Glendale for 2 terms. I currently work for Comar Investment as the director of construction. For the past 10 years, Comar Investment has successfully built many projects. For example, we built an assisted living facility and a business center in the city of Chino. In a couple days, the city of Chino will be awarding us for a second time the Best New Industrial Development Award. I am here today to tell you all that Comar Investment is serious about this project. We care about the city of Glendale just as you all do, and I believe Comar Investment is the developer you need for this project. We are qualified developers, and we are looking forward to working with the city of Glendale. We have acquired 3 complete estimate from qualified contractors, and our plans are ready to be reviewed. We would really appreciate the opportunity to be awarded this project. Thank you all for your time.
Before you go, are you suggesting that you have a pro forma already ready?
Well, we call contractors, and we have estimate for the project.
Okay, so it's not the pro forma.
No, estimates
For the cost of construction.
cost of construction, yes. For
Thank you.
3 qualified contractors.
Thank you. That was the last card. Oral communications closed. Mr. Howard, do you have something to say?
Mr. Chair, excuse me, members of the agency, the one comment perhaps that
I'm sorry, we don't have a performance. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
the one question that was raised was the issue of the uncertainty of what occurred in closed session. I just need to remind the agency that closed session communications are confidential. The agency holds the privilege, so a majority of the agency could waive that privilege and indicate publicly what decision, if any, were made in that closed session. I know staff, I wasn't present, staff was present, and certainly the agency could waive the privilege and indicate what decision, again, if any, were made, what was discussed in closed session relative to the acquisition or potential acquisition of real property or sale of real property.
Mrs. Starbird?
Yeah, on that note, I should note that in closed session, the council did authorize staff to an extent to convey the council's conclusion to the Colmar Group, and both Phil and I did that on separate occasions, to the extent that the council had authorized in closed session.
Would a motion to waive the confidentiality of closed session require a noticed agenda item?
You want to do that right now, you can do it now.
It could be done now.
Could be done now if
we
you want to respond to the speaker.
Well, I guess the question is for my colleagues, is it something that we would like to get into at this point?
Remember, the Brown Act allows you to briefly respond to individuals who address you at oral communications. So, and the term brief is used within the statutory framework in this section 3 times. So, brief means brief.
Right. And of course, we're not just, even though some information was conveyed to Comar Investments, certainly not made public. I mean, the public, it's an issue for the public to be aware of.
Correct.
At this point. And the question is it something we want to get into at this point? What do you guys...
No.
Mr. Raymond?
No, I would say no. Whatever has been conveyed, frankly, should not have been. And to respond briefly, I don't know how we're going to address those issues. Not at this time.
Jerry, enough has already been leaked out of closed session about that meeting. I don't care to go further.
Whatever the majority wants to do is fine with me.
I tend to think, since they have already spoken, staff has already told them what's going on, there's a lot of rumors in town I think the best thing to do for us, we didn't kill anyone in the closed session, and so what we did is not a crime. So I personally don't have an issue with letting the public know what is it that happened. We're not selling anything, we're not buying anything, so I wouldn't have any problems with informing the public so they know what that is. So if there's a motion, I can pass the gavel to my
My
co-chair.
general, yeah, and let me tell you where I'm at. My general feeling is that there were some issues raised regarding our process, and I think at the very least we owe an explanation as to our process, that we set one set of rules and, as the speaker said, perhaps went off on a different track. So I wouldn't be opposed to as you said, we haven't.
Didn't staff already inform Comar
Yes.
of that?
Yes, they did, but it's not just between us and Comar. I think members of the public, other contractors who have business with the city or potentially perhaps have a question raised as to what we did. In terms of the process, not so much the evaluation of one project versus the other, but we did apparently change course at some point from our March 20th meeting.
I'm still opposed to releasing closed-door information.
Okay, well,
So,
we won't release it without approval. I would make a motion to waive the confidentiality of the closed session to address the issues raised by the speakers.
I'll second it.
Motion is second. Discussion. Roll call.
Authority agency members Draymond,
No.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
no.
Yusefian.
Aye. Motion carries.
Since the privilege has now been waived by the majority, you've got a number of ways to approach this. You could ask Mr. Starbird to explain either now briefly or convey to him the opportunity to then explain at some other time, perhaps tomorrow or otherwise by phone call, to representatives from Comar about what occurred in closed session, as opposed to each one of the council members with their own opinion here today trying to explain that, which will go far beyond, more than likely, the requirement that the comments be brief.
I think I would appreciate Mr. Starbird to explain, because part of this is so the public would know what's going on. So, Mr. Starbird.
Well, prefacing that, let me say, as we indicated, both Mr. Lanzafame and I spoke on separate occasions with representatives of Comar, because as you will recall, in closed session, we did ask you in what manner and to what extent you wish to inform Comar as to what I would call this change of course. And our recommendation was that we be candid and honest with them relative to that, and I believe that was the conclusion of the council. And I think, as Phil and I compared notes, that was the full extent that we went, not a great deal of editorializing, just the facts as we broadly presented them. And with that, let me repeat as best I can what we conveyed, and that is that we had received unsolicited from the Amity Group a proposal which effectively tied their property at Wilson and Brand together with the property in terms of the development potential at Wilson and Maryland. We didn't ask for it. It came in. We recognized that it was in, I call it, midstream of a process that you had directed us to undertake, but that was Amity's choice, and they had presented this proposal, which, under a number of scenarios, options as they called them, essentially required that if they were to proceed with the development of a four-star hotel on the Wilson Brand site, that there would need to be either a commitment of the Maryland Wilson site for a loft product or other type hotel product, or a commitment to discontinue development of that site for a period of time as a hotel. And that the agency's conclusion, given the level of importance of development and its potential as a four-star hotel at Brand & Wilson for mid-brand, that the agency had directed us to essentially flush out the proposal from Amity in that regard, and to essentially place on hold. We didn't say terminate it. We said place on hold until we had done that, the previous direction on the Wilson, Maryland site. At least in my conversation, indicated the feeling was that would likely be 2 or 3 months to do an effective job of that. I think Phil conveyed generally the same time frame. They expressed frustration as they have here today, but that was about as far as we had taken that conversation. I think that fairly portrays the council's or the agency's conclusion.
And my question is to my colleagues, and I would ask that again. I guess we asked Comar not to give us any further information, so they don't have to spend any more money. Is that correct? We basically said, do not give us any performance, do not do anything.
From my standpoint, again, we had 2 separate conversations. Best as I recall, the question was asked, so what do we, Comar, do now? And I indicated that from our standpoint, the process of the RFP and looking at competitive proposals on Wilson brand would be in abeyance until we were able to flesh out the proposal that's been made to us by a media group.
And as far as I'm concerned, I think one of the speakers says, let's do orange to orange instead of apple to orange. Unfortunately, we won't be able to do that because we do not own one of the sites on Brand and Wilson. That's a privately held piece of property. So no other developer can go out there and give us a proposal on both sides. The only thing we could basically sit down and evaluate is options on the Wilson site, Wilson and Maryland site. That's all. We cannot look at the other side. We don't own. The agency does not own that. If the Comar decides to turn in their performance voluntarily, is there a problem for us?
I think the answer is Comar can do what they'd like.
Okay.
We wouldn't encourage it. I don't think we'd go beyond the statement that Phil and I made to them in our telephone conversation. Certainly, if they want to give us something, anybody can present anything they like. But that's not to say that you've set up a process to entertain that.
Okay. Mr. Draymond.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that from what I was hearing from the speakers, the comparison to apples to oranges was not the Wilson and Maryland site to the Brandon Wilson site. It's that the development of the Wilson and Maryland site between 2 competitors, if you will, should be an equal process. And their position, from what I hear the speakers say, is that their belief is that this agency has taken steps to preclude that from being a fair comparison or a fair competition. The other thing, since we're now liberated to an extent here, and I, from what I'm hearing from the speaker, at least for myself, one of my questions is whether or not that site should be developed at all. But I don't think it was my interpretation that the decision had anything to do with tying the 2 sites together or not tying them together. I don't think there's a firm conclusion there at all. That's my opinion.
Well, let me say I agree with that opinion. For me, I'm interested in the hotel property at Brand and Wilson, that property be built. The secondary property that the city owns, I've said it at least 5 or 6 times, if there's going to be a 4 or 5-star hotel on that site, I don't know what we're doing subsidizing another hotel half a block away.
Starbird?
I think it's important to point out that although we didn't ask for, encourage, or solicit the immediate proposal, it did tie the 2 sites together. An important distinction. They did tie the 2 together, both with respect to either development of both of them or to essentially foregoing development on one of the sites. But the important part is that they did tie the 2, which I think is an important distinction we need to make relative to the potential development of both of them, just for the record.
Right. Well, Mr. Draymond.
I'm sorry. May I just respond to that for a
Yes.
moment? Just with all due respect, they sought to tie the two together. I don't think they have tied the two together, and I think that's the distinction.
May I talk about the proposal they had made?
Well, again, we're talking about brief responses. Each individual council member should have an opportunity to make a brief response. You don't want to get into essentially any kind of lengthy either statement, dialogue, or discussion, or debate.
It's about one of the comments that my colleagues made that was not interested in subsidizing the other side. I think it's important for the public to know the proposal that was made to us requested a $20 million subsidy on the Wilson and Brand project that we do not own the land on. There was no subsidy on Wilson and Maryland project, which we own the property. They're two different properties. The subsidy was not required on the piece of land that the city owns. The subsidy was required from the piece of land that the maker of the offer owned. So let's make that very clear. There was no subsidy for that. As a matter of fact, their offer was that it would not require any subsidy to build a second hotel on the property that the city owns. So that's what the issue was. And I think what we have done as agency on a 5-0 vote was to ask them to provide us with numbers, give us a pro forma, because we did not have numbers that was able to verify or check them. We don't know, is the subsidy justified, it's not justified, what the amount is, how they arrived to it, or any of that. So just like anything else, when Mr. Caruso is sitting in here, when Mr. Caruso came to us, he had to justify it, he had to bring documents and numbers, and we checked it out. So this is no different than anything else, and at this point, the agency has not given them one penny, and we haven't done anything. We just asked them, provide us with documentation and information. And that's what has happened. And if you gentlemen would like to provide your information, and don't come back to us and later on say, you asked us to provide it, and we did this, and so you owe us this. If you want to voluntarily do it, that's up to you. Staff will look at that. But at this point, people are giving us numbers. That's all they're doing. We're not giving them anything. I guess that's done. Mr.
I didn't say anything. And clearly, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there, and the Amides did pull a stroke of salesmanship or gamesmanship or maneuvering that did tie, in my mind, these projects together. And at risk is the development of a five-star hotel that the agency, I think, in our attempt to do what's best for the city, could not simply avoid fleshing out, as Mr. Starbird said, their proposal to check its validity and verifiability before we took any further steps that would possibly put such an attractive development at risk. And that's all I'm going to say.
4-star. Let's not go up on the
4-star,
stars.
sorry.
Mr. Quintero.
Yeah, I want to more or less say the same thing. I mean, we've just started the idea of subsidies. I haven't voted for any subsidies. I haven't voted for anything. That we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. This is basically a unilateral contract that a person and firm has offered us, but I'm certainly not there yet. I'll do everything I can to bring that project to the city of Glendale, but I'm sure as heck not going to give up money that's due the taxpayers of the city until it's proven that, in fact, it's needed for a project, as Mr. Caruso well knows.
And one last thing I think that staff was seeking direction on as part of this was how much, if anything, what kind of negotiating authority or direction that staff was going to get to take back to Comar, or I'm sorry, to Amidi, how much money they were going to either spend to purchase our land, and how much we would be able to essentially, whether it's tied into a subsidy or not, what's the value of our land, and how much are you going to give it to? How much are you going to give us for it?
Right.
And we did not enter into those negotiations.
No.
It was our decision not to, but to, as we said, obtain a greater sense of the validity of their proposal.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Now that we're done with this, all communications closed. I
Right,
hope you
one
got
question.
your answers. Mr.
Mr. Howard, does that mean all future discussions between the media and us is now in open session?
Not necessarily. If it's something that is subject to a lawful closed session, you can still have it. There
Will you be asking us if we wish to continue in closed session?
Was that asked? I believe that's something that was asked as a matter of policy, whether you want to continue to have closed session discussions involving this project.
We didn't ask about future meetings.
I'm asking.
We did, if you recall, ask about how to convey this information, whether back out in a public meeting or directly to Colmar, and the decision had been convey it directly to Colmar. Now you've conveyed it in a public meeting. We really hadn't talked about whether or not to bring whatever response they give us back into a closed session. We hadn't talked about that.
Well, that's going to eventually come up. You're going to put on a closed session, and somebody's going to say, why is it in closed session? We've now discussed it in open session, so I'm just trying to figure out where you're going to go.
I think we would, under normal circumstances, anticipate this coming back into closed session. If the agency directs it be put out in a public session, like has been done before, relative to the Maryland Wilson site, we would do that. But we would first, I think, first reaction of ours would be, if it's appropriate for Brown Act session, if it involves the potential sale of property or encumbering of city property or agency property, we would normally put it on a closed session agenda. But again, you can waive that and put it on a public one.
How do my colleagues would like to proceed with the rest from now on this item?
Closed session.
I think the cat's out of the bag. I mean, we've basically put forth the parameters of the issues. I'm not sure closed session would do anything more than raise some eyebrows and some suspicions about what we're doing behind closed doors.
I would agree with that. I think we're at the point that I think we should just discuss this thing in the public open session.
Well,
Public property, public open money.
No, it's not public property yet, because once again, I'm focused on the private land that's owned by a meeting. That's my interest there. So we don't normally do these things in open session, so I don't know. I mean, I'd leave it up to the staff and Mr. Howard in terms of whether it's appropriate to do an open session discussion or not. I have no idea. I mean, it's up to you.
And you're dealing with two different principles. One is the legal permissibility of having a closed session to discuss the sale, exchange, or purchase of real property, versus the policy decision of discussing the item in open session. And in this particular project, Mr. Starbird's correct. It has, and the mayor is correct as well. It has bounced from closed session into open session, back into closed session. Not inappropriate, but it has created this potential expectation that maybe this matter should be discussed in open session. Certainly we can look at whatever confidential information that may be provided in a pro forma and determine what portions of that may have to be redacted. If it was going to be an open session, for example, if there's any trade secret information or if there's any privileged financial information, shouldn't be much, but we can certainly look at it.
Right, well, that's specifically what I was thinking of in terms of that, the operators and franchisees of the private property and how they're going to feel about whatever, as you mentioned, trade secrets they might be.
Just a reminder that a closed session for discussions of real property is to ensure that our negotiating position is not impaired, our, meaning the taxpayer's negotiating position, is not impaired by providing so much information that it works to the detriment of the taxpayers in the negotiation for the sale, exchange, purchase, etc. of city's real property.
Mr. Starber?
I guess my encouragement would be to cross that bridge after we get Colmar's proposal. It's possible.
You mean
cross that, not
Hamidi?
Colmar, I'm sorry, Amidi's proposal. Cross that bridge then. We don't know exactly what that proposal is going to be. And if it entails the Wilson, Maryland site to the point that they would propose that we have a sale or exchange or other encumbrance of our real estate, then you'll have a basis to go back into closed session. If it doesn't, then you might not. In which case, we won't know until they give us what they're going to give us.
Mr. Draymond?
Yeah, if it isn't dealing with the purchase of the property, there's no reason in my mind at this point to go back. By the time I got home, I already had messages and phone calls from people repeating back to me exactly what had been said in closed session. So I don't even know what kind of closed session it is. So, Mr. Howard, when you say it bounced back, I say it fell on its head and just laid there. In any case, perhaps it belongs out in the public anyway, except within the parameters that Mr. Starbird was mentioning.
Mr. Weaver?
Same thing as Mr. Raymond said. I am continue to get sick and tired of the continued leaks out of closed sessions that have been going on for years now. It does the city no good at all for certain people sitting up here leaking stuff out. Within 24 hours, I'm hearing things back. What I said, my position, so on. I don't know what games are being played, but it sure does a disservice to this city. That's what upsets me the most. I hope someday the people up here learn to keep their mouths shut.
Mr. Raymond?
Yeah, well, one of the problems is exactly what we've seen here today. You had speakers that came up here that were indicating that we had made some sort of an arrangement for an aloft hotel, that we'd gone down that road for that property. And, of course, as all of you know, that wasn't the discussion at all.
No.
And that's some of the negative from closed sessions. That is not closed sessions. Now, you can argue maybe it didn't belong there in the first place. We can all agree or disagree on that, but if we're going to have closed session, then it is a little disconcerting as the new kid on the block here to go through all of the trappings of that, only to hear it all repeated back to me verbatim later in the day.
Okay. Well, it looks like this will become an open session issue.
Well, again,
Looks like there is majority going in that direction.
Yeah, as I think Mr. Starbird's point is well taken. Let us have an
Except
opportunity to
trade
review it
secrets,
and
we
determine
would like to-
Yeah,
the appropriateness
let's
of
see
having
what
the
we
matter
receive back,
returned to
and then
closed session.
we'll
We'll let you
confer
know.
with whether it goes in closed session or back on a public agenda.
And that also means that we can now freely discuss any of that items with Emilio Comar.
Well, I guess Mr. Weaver,
now
Mr.
open.
Chair, I guess I'd ask the city attorney. The council has granted, I guess, couldn't the council make a decision? They've granted that this item not be confidential for the purpose of these statements here today, but not necessarily to carry on this conversation outside the chambers?
They've
Or
waived
can they?
they've waived the privilege of closed session.
Okay.
Of the closed session that occurred last Tuesday. So certainly waiving that privilege, you can speak about it. I don't encourage that because you end up with 5 potentially different viewpoints of what
Absolutely.
occurred and different interpretations, and that can create more confusion. So my suggestion would be that you speak with one unified voice, whether that's through the city manager or the director of redevelopment or whoever it may be. That would be my suggestion. But you're not precluded from stating what occurred in closed session. You've waived the privilege.
That will never happen.
That's one thing I agree with him.
One could
He's
be
absolutely
optimistic.
right. No, you can't get 5 same story from 5 of us. It's never going to happen.
That's why I suggest perhaps
All right.
you delegate that to the city manager
All
and the
right.
executive director.
Let's move on to the next item.
On the business agenda at 6A is Director of Development Services regarding approval of transfer of the for-sale housing pad to Americana Homes LP for the Town Center project, Americana at Brand. At 6A1 is resolution authorizing the transfer of certain agency property for sale housing pad located on the Americana at Brand site to Americana Homes LP, and authorizing the Executive Director to execute necessary documents to effectuate the conveyance.
And this is being done on open session, so there's no closed session on this. All right, with that, is there a motion?
I have questions.
Mr. Weaver,
Move 6A1.
second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second.
Wait,
Where are the cards? I don't have them.
Margaret said she'd be here today. Yeah, you shouldn't hold the
Yeah, I
card,
know.
though.
Cut loose with that card, Margaret.
That's right.
I mean, Rick wants to hear what you're going to say.
We're not going to charge you extra.
Well, I thought there was a chance that Mr. Caruso would be here today, and of course I had to wear my hat
Your name for
and
the
blow
record,
him
please.
away. I didn't come in with it on, but then when I saw him here, I went out to my car and got it, and just so that he could have a look at my famous hat. My name is Margaret Hammond, and I am here to once again voice my opinion regarding the ongoing gifting of property, whatever, and et cetera, to Mr. Caruso. I started this conversation back, a few years back when all this started, had always felt there was no reason that we shouldn't have just leased the land, not given it. No other cities have done it, and including Santa Anita. That man didn't let go of his land. He's too smart. But he was a good businessman, and he knew that if he held on to his land, no matter what happened in the future, he would have that land back at some point. Whether that project in Santa Anita is a go-ahead or a fall behind. But we proceeded as a city to give away our valuable downtown property, which at one point was quoted as being worth $36 million, $77 million. How many million would you say it's worth today in the market of where the real estate has gone? I'd say, well, more than $100 million, couple hundred maybe, huh? And I'm saying, here we are. I didn't know there was anything left to give away. We gave them the streets. We gave them the parking lots. We've given them everything you can, rights over our public park. And now this is another point of measure. What does this actually mean, what we're giving him now? What is it we are giving him now? I thought they were supposed to be apartments and condos being built there. I have heard that it's going to be all condos. And what is the reasoning behind changing it from apartment owning to condo? I find this a very interesting, I understand that subject is coming up at the planning. So I again am questioning what's going on here. Seems like every time you turn around it's something else. As I said, the fact that the park is being given away, that gripes me worse than anything. Because to think that we as citizens of Glendale will have to drive over to Mr. Caruso's office and get permission for us to use our own park, I think is a way out of line. And if I have to go over there, I'm hoping that he'll send me his limousine to take me over and back, because the traffic is terrible. The only thing is, I'm not sure what kind of a limousine he might send. It might be a hearse or something, you know. But anyway, we get a good time. We have a good time. You guys missed it all before you came in. But as I say, seriously, that's what I'm here asking you. What does this mean? What is this conveyance of whatever property rights more mean? I haven't heard any description of it. Thank you.
Mr. Starbird, explain this.
Mr. Chair, I think Margaret makes a very good point, because obviously the way it's been presented in sort of summary form in the agenda is confusing to her and might be confusing to other people, because this is not an additional conveyance of additional land. This is carrying out the development agreement for the land under the condominium and retail development in that portion that has always been planned for conveyance, for which the benefit of that conveyance is reflected in the pro forma and will go toward the gross revenues of the development, which eventually could return some profit to the agency. This is conveyance from the original holder to a limited corporation, which is done typically for development purposes. It's not additional conveyance. It's not more than what was ever. It is exactly what was contemplated. And I want to point out, you retained fee title to some portions of the development, and you allowed the conveyance of other portions of the development. And conveyance of land for redevelopment purpose has been done in California, throughout California, by communities across California for the past 50 years to effectuate a redevelopment plan.
Mr. Quintero.
Okay, I'm looking at the Kaiser Marston letter, and so my first question is, both entities, Americana LLC, which is a Caruso-affiliated entity, and then BSC Americana LLC, a Barrow Street entity, they're both going to be general partners? Is that and who's going to be, further on, it talks about who's going to actually be who's going to have the majority controlling interest? That's going to be Caruso still?
He's on.
Your name for a record, please.
Rick Caruso. Thank you for having me here today. We are the managing general partner on this. To give you a little bit of background, I'll just take 2 seconds. As the housing market started to cool down, the original intent always, if you remember, was for us to build the apartments and the retail, and we are still building apartments, Margaret, because I want you to live very close to me. So,
Are you going to do one of those?
absolutely. And we were always planning on selling off and having a third party build the condominiums. As the market started cooling off with the condominium developers, it quickly became a concern that we were not going to get the quality we wanted commensurate with the project. So we made the decision to just do it ourselves, and so we can maintain the quality even in a slumping or a declining market. Barrow Street will be our partner in that project. We're the managing partner. We make the decisions. As you can see, we're already well underway. So this is a formality to do the transfer so we can close our construction loan, because we've been building that project with cash on hand.
Okay, my next question.
Mr. Quintero, if I can, we should note, though, that the Crusoe-affiliated entity still stands behind the project in the same way they have with respect to the retail development.
Right.
That was pointed out in the staff report.
Okay, my next question is Barrow Street itself. The letter mentions that we don't have a financial statement for Barrow Street. When can we get a financial statement or have some idea as to what their
Can I answer that?
liquidity?
Well, we're guaranteeing it anyway. So it's our financial statement that's already been reviewed by Kaiser Marston, which he references in here. So the financial risk does not change, the character of it. Barrow Street is a fund. It's a $400 million fund. And whether they're $400 million, $1 billion, or $10 million, again, it's our financial credit that's on the line on this. That's not changing. And we're guaranteeing the construction loan.
Which is why Kaiser Marston didn't feel the need to review that one, because, as they note in the Kaiser Marston report, Caruso stands behind it, continues to be the guarantor on the project. As a result, it's their balance sheet that they'd look to for that purpose, and that hasn't changed. And it's what it was before. So we have the same level of guarantee.
And the only reason we're bringing in Barrow, to be quite honest, we've never built condominiums, so we felt it was prudent to team up with a firm that has built many condominiums. Now, we have in-house expertise with Luis that we've added with the company, but it just made prudent sense to have a partner in this part of the project. They have no interest in anything else going on site.
Well, is Barrow Street willing to provide some statements to us, some equity, some idea of who they are and what they are? I mean, I personally would like to see that. I don't see why we wouldn't want to require. I mean, this is a 50% partnership with you, or 49, or what's the?
It's basically 50-50, and we're managing partner.
Right. Well, I mean, I'd still like to have some statement from them as to.
And Mr. Quintero, I believe in the review of the loan documents, this is equity that's being put up, so the equity is going to be there, or the loan won't fund. Once the loan is funded, the dollars will be there to construct, and then the Caruso entity would be the guarantor of that loan. So whether, again, as Mr. Caruso said, whether they have $10 million, $100 million, or $1 billion behind them, it would be perhaps of interest, but it really wouldn't affect the way this is structured.
Not at risk.
Because they're not putting their full faith and credit behind this project. They're just making an equity investment for which they're expecting to get a return, but that's the deal between Caruso and Barrows.
Right.
It's Caruso whose full faith and credit stands behind this deal.
And Mr. Caruso, is this a private fund or a publicly traded fund? Or?
Private fund.
Private fund.
Yes.
Mr. Van Might. Mrs. Van Might.
Mr. Chair, members of the agency, we are to understand as well that Kaiser Marston is in the process of evaluating financial data from Barrow Street, and in looking at some Barrow Street information on that's readily available on the website. And to add to what Mr. Caruso has also indicated, the current assessment of their capability is in excess of $750 million, with the funding of over $40 billion of real estate investments over the last 40 years, and they have a targeted investment track that they take with regard to high net worth real estate investing. So that, coupled the information that's readily available, coupled with the analysis that Kaiser Marston is currently completing, and we expect to have a letter very shortly from CALS, to my understanding, as well as the analysis that he has supplied in the evaluation of the assignment and loan commitment, we have come forward with the recommendation that we feel comfortable that this partnership will work for purposes of completing this component of the project, and that is our expectation, coupled with the very solid guarantee for entire completion of the project that we have from Mr. Cruz on every component of that project. And that was something that we ensured going in when we approved the disposition and development agreement, that no matter what, that at the end of the day, Mr. Caruso would be responsible in every way, shape, and form for completing all of the defined improvements, including the for-sale housing component of the project.
Senator Najarian. Mr. Secretary.
Well, our job as a redevelopment agency and a city is to make sure that we keep the city's best interests in mind and protect them, and I see that the city is in no less a safe position as we would be would we not transfer this. In fact, with the addition of BSC Americana, Mr. Crusoe says they've got some expertise in condominium development, so I think we're even given a greater guarantee that the project would be completed successfully, so I don't have a problem with this.
Mr. Quintero.
Well, when Kaiser Marston gets the completed report and financials, I'd like to take a look at it.
Is there a motion?
I already made a motion.
Yeah, there is.
Is there a
Second.
Roll call.
Agency members Draymond?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Chairman Yusefian.
Aye. What's next, please?
Are there any agency member or staff comments or new business?
Move we adjourn.
Getting none?
Thank you all.
Second.
Second? We're adjourned.